My wife betrayed me with the Casanova and her own life because I left her, so I decided to take revenge and ruin his life. My name is David Watson, and my wife is Emily Hayes Watson. I work as the senior editor at the New York City Herald, and she's the executive vice president at Crimson Publishing. We have 2 children, David Jr., who is 22, and Olivia Emily, who is 20. David Jr. is about to complete his studies in international relations at Harvard, while Olivia is pursuing her degree at Stanford. I sometimes joke that she's majoring in underwater pottery, though she'd kill me for saying that. Both of them are doing exceptionally well in their studies. Emily and I both make a good living, though she earns a bit more than I do. Life seemed pretty good, or so I thought. We were really looking forward to a special weekend together. Emily had had a tough week and had been excited about this charity gala for quite some time. She had bought a stunning new dress, black, backless, strapless, ending just above the knee with a small slit on the left side. She wore the diamond necklace I gifted her for our 20th wedding anniversary, her favorite emerald earrings, and a replica of Jackie Kennedy's ring. Her blonde hair was styled in an elegant updo, and she looked absolutely breathtaking. I was dressed in my tailored Ralph Lauren tuxedo, and that's all that needs to be said about my outfit. Emily stood about 10 feet away, leaning against a fake fireplace, sipping champagne from a flute and laughing like a college girl. I wasn't bothered by that part. It was the slick-looking guy talking to her, touching her arm and shoulder, whispering in her ear with a smirk that got under my skin. He had just said something, and she was nodding along. That was enough. Time to step in and rescue her from this sleaze. I was about to make my move when a soft hand caught my arm. Don't do anything. My husband fell for his tricks, and his pals are watching you, a calm voice said. I looked down to see a striking brunette standing beside me. She pointed out a tough-looking guy about 20 feet away who seemed focused entirely on me. Then she gestured toward the balcony doors, where another man stood, surveying the crowd. He's planning to take her outside and make his move. If she doesn't give in, he'll move on to someone else, but he rarely misses his target. No offense. I observed my wife still smiling, walking with Mr. Sleaze toward the balcony, and out they went. The 2 henchmen closed the doors behind them and took up their positions. I turned to the woman beside me, who looked melancholy as she sipped her whiskey sour. Who are you, and how do you know all this? I asked. That was me 5 years ago, she revealed. I was taken aback as she guided me to stand with my back to the balcony doors, then began to share her story. I was here with my husband, supporting a charity event. We were having a great time, planning to make a significant donation. He started talking to me, and before I knew it, he was touching my back and suggesting we step outside. I was captivated by his charm and followed him. Once outside, he made a move, touched me inappropriately, and whispered sweet nothings that made my heart race. I was shocked but intrigued. Then he made his proposition. A weekend with him, filled with passion, and I would return home afterward. It was supposed to be a one-time thing. I went back to my husband and told him I was leaving for the weekend with this man. He stood there, devastated, as I walked away with him. That was the end of my marriage. Her story continued, detailing how her marriage crumbled, how she spiraled into a life of fleeting encounters, and how her husband eventually took his own life. She spent 6 months in a psychiatric ward, lost custody of her children, and hadn't seen them since. They were 12 and 9 when they left. Now they want nothing to do with me, she said, glancing at her watch. It takes about 10 minutes for him to work his magic. He's been out there for about 8. She warned me not to acknowledge them if they came back in. Ignore her if she tries to talk to you. If she does, respond as you see fit, and we'll leave together. It'll infuriate him and might make her reconsider. It could be the only satisfaction you get, at least for now. She then gestured for me to keep an eye out. Sure enough, I heard footsteps behind me. Emily placed her hand on my arm. David, there's something I need to tell you. I shrugged her off and snapped, Stay away from me. You're nothing but trouble. If you don't come home tonight, don't bother coming back at all. We're done, and I'll make sure you regret it. I gestured to the woman beside me, and we left together. David, we need to talk, Emily pleaded as I walked away. The crowd had quieted down, watching us leave. We exited the gala, and I asked, How did you get here? Car service, she replied. Allow me, ma'am, I offered, calling for my car. They brought my Lincoln around, and she got in. I tipped the valet, got in, and drove off. I know a quiet place where we can talk if that's okay with you. Great idea, David. I could use a drink. We drove to a quiet bar that catered to an older crowd. After parking, we went inside, found a secluded table, and ordered drinks. She finished sharing her story, and I told her about Emily and me. She was a university professor who had a promising career until the news broke. I explained my background, 6 years in the Navy, specializing in special operations, and nearly 2 decades as a journalist and editor. We had 2 kids, David Jr. and Olivia Emily, both away at college. So, what's your plan? She asked. I don't even know what I'm feeling, let alone what to do. If she's not home when I get there, I'll have to take drastic measures. She'll pay, and so will he. Oh God. I choked up, tears streaming down my face. She held my hand, looking at me as if the world was ending for both of us. I looked at her and realized I could take this further if I wanted to, but I couldn't. If there was any hope of reconciliation, I had to go home and deal with this. I'm sorry, but a rebound fling isn't my style. I need to go home and figure this out. Please give me your number so we can stay in touch. And I need that jerk's name so I can start his downfall. She took my phone, entered her contact details, Jennifer Avery, and handed it back. David, you're a good man. You've been wronged. I hoped for more, but I understand. Go home and try to sort this out. Best of luck. I paid the bill, drove her home, and dropped her off. When I got home, Emily wasn't there. That was it. It was 11:45 p.m. I grabbed my phone and called my best friend, Jack Coleman. He's also my lawyer. We served together in the Navy, and we often joked about how he became a lawyer while I landed a decent job. A tired voice answered, Hey, Dave, what's up? It's late. Is everything okay? No, Jack, it's not. I need you here at 9 a.m. tomorrow, ready to go into full lawyer mode, and maybe even best friend mode. I'm filing for divorce. Now he was wide awake. I could hear his wife in the background asking what was going on. It's Dave. We've got a problem. You were at that event, right? Emily met someone, didn't she? Oh man, you didn't know? Just be here, Jack, please. No problem, Dave. I'll be there. I started making a list of things to do. I looked up a locksmith and jotted down his number. Then I found a website that buys cars for cash with clear titles. I had bought Emily a Mercedes for our 18th anniversary, but it was in my name. I noted their contact details and packed 2 small bags with clothes, shoes, and toiletries. I left them by the front door and went to bed. I woke up at 6:30 a.m., made coffee, and checked the newsroom on my computer. Joe Martin, an investigative reporter, was working. I called him and asked him to dig up everything he could find on a guy named Roger Benson. This is confidential, Joe. It's personal. No problem, boss. I'll get right on it. Still no sign of Emily. It was almost 9 o'clock, and I was feeling increasingly anxious. I called the car buyer and told him about the Mercedes I was selling. He asked for the model and make and quoted a price. A 2-year-old Mercedes, huh? How about $1,800? He sounded surprised. You sure it's not stolen? Nope, but you'll have to pick it up. Where are you located? I gave him my address, and he said he'd be there in 20 minutes. Don't sell it to anyone else. Wait for me, okay? And he hung up. About 10 minutes later, just as I finished the call with the locksmith, Jack arrived with his paralegal, Samantha. We went inside, and I served them coffee and muffins. About 20 minutes later, the car buyer, Tim, showed up. I showed him the car's registration and title. He wanted to know if there was anything wrong with it. I told him it was in good shape, but I didn't need it anymore because of the divorce. Well, I'm glad you're not divorcing me, he joked. They brought a tow truck, and I signed all the paperwork. Tim paid me and took the car. I shook his hand, and he wished me luck. Still no sign of my unfaithful wife. I went inside and found Jack and Samantha hard at work in the dining room. The divorce papers were ready, and they had prepared a restraining order. They were also working on a lawsuit for alienation of affection. Jack asked about the car, and I told him I sold it because I didn't need it anymore. You didn't do anything illegal. It's a bit sneaky, but hey, It's impressive, he said. Let's handle the financial stuff online. For the next 45 minutes, we dealt with banks, investment firms, insurance companies, cell phones, mortgages, and my pensions. By noon, my wife still hadn't returned, and the locksmith had changed all the locks and added keyless deadbolts to all the doors. We went out for lunch at Smith & Walensky, where we met Jack's wife, Claire, known as CJ. She gave me a supportive hug. Over lunch, CJ looked at me, waiting for me to speak. What happened, Dave? What are you planning to do next? I didn't do anything except trust my wife. She blindsided me, and I'm still trying to process it. Is there any way to fix this? Hell no. She's still not back, and honestly, the only way out might be if she ends up dead. CJ looked at me sympathetically and nodded. I understand. I just can't believe Emily did this. After lunch, we headed home. I got back around 5 p.m., still alone, with no sign of my wife. I grabbed a beer and fell asleep in my recliner. I woke up at 6:30 a.m., sore and tired, and decided to do something I hadn't done in years. I went to church. Being there helped a bit. I sat quietly in the back, praying for guidance, but it felt like my prayers were hitting a wall. After Mass, I stayed a while longer, hoping for a sign, but it seemed like I was on my own. And that's how it had to be. I drove home, grabbed a coffee at a fast food place, and parked my Lincoln in the garage next to my 1978 Ford Bronco. With the weather changing, I'd be driving it more often. After locking up the garage, I turned on the TV and watched the Giants-Eagles game, but as usual, the Giants lost. That summed up my luck lately. At 4:30 p.m., I got a text from Emily. On my way home, 20 minutes. The restraining order was about to kick in, so things were about to get intense. 20 minutes later, I heard an unfamiliar car in the driveway. Peeking out the window, I saw some fancy European car, and Emily stepped out of the passenger side. She leaned in for a kiss with someone, probably Roger Benson. After he drove off, she came up to the house, but her keys didn't work with the new locks. Confused, she spotted the 2 small bags by the door. "What's going on?" she muttered. She rang the bell repeatedly, shouting for me to open the door. Frustrated, she yelled, "Open the door, David." Finally, I went to the door and faced my furious wife. She glared at me and demanded to know what was happening. Simple, Emily. Your keys don't work because you don't live here anymore. The woman I was married to used to live here, but she's gone now. Her eyes widened and she leaned in, but I cut her off. Don't even try it. I don't know where that mouth has been or who it's been on. How many times did you sleep with him or do other things we didn't do? What we had was special. Oh, spare me, she snapped. You disappeared for 2 days without a call. Did you even think about your husband once? Did you keep your wedding rings on while you were with him? She flinched and started to stammer. At least you kept your anniversary jewelry. They were gifts, so they're yours, I said, taking off her rings. But these are mine. And your engagement ring was my grandmother's. Remember when I proposed to you? You won't need these anymore. She started crying and shaking. Why are you doing this? She blurted out. It was just one night. I had a right to it. You don't own me, she said, regaining her confidence. You need to let go of your pride, David. We need to move on. You're right, and I've been trying to do that. Here, this is for you. I handed her an envelope, and she looked at it, confused. What's this? She asked. Money. I sold your car, the Mercedes. I didn't need it anymore. She reacted as if I had slapped her. What did you do with my car? It wasn't your car. I bought it for you, but it was in my name, so I sold it. I thought giving you the money would be a fair gesture. That's all of it. But there's only, she counted the bills, $1, $800 here. That car was worth way more. What's going on? That's all it was worth, much like our marriage after Friday night. The shock on her face was clear. She looked stunned and began to protest. How could you be so heartless? I came back to you. And you left me for 2 days, I retorted. By the way, where's the Jackie ring? The one you insisted on having? I offered to get a real replica, but you preferred the knockoff. Where is it? She turned pale, stuttering. He wanted a souvenir from our weekend, she mumbled, avoiding eye contact. So not only did you give yourself away, you gave away the ring you claimed to cherish. She blushed and nodded. 6:03 p.m. Get out, Emily. We're done. No, I want to come inside. This is my home. Not anymore it isn't, I said, slamming the door and bolting it shut. Leaning against the solid oak, tears welled in my eyes. I could hear her ringing the doorbell, pounding on the door, and shouting for me to let her in. I dialed 911. 911. What's your emergency? Police, fire, or medical? I have a restraining order against my soon-to-be ex-wife. She's outside causing a scene. Please send someone quickly. Minutes later, 2 police cars arrived with flashing lights. 4 officers approached Emily while 2 came to my door. I handed them the restraining order, and they verified it with the station. I then gave them her copy, requesting discretion. Meanwhile, the officers calmed Emily down as she received the notice. Where am I supposed to go? She yelled. Go to hell, Emily. I couldn't care less, I replied. The officers informed her she had to leave and escorted her and her bags to the curb. She hailed an Uber and directed the driver to a nearby hotel. She stepped in and drove off. The next day, at work, I summoned Joe Martin, our top investigative reporter, and told him to dig up everything he could on Roger Benson. I stressed that this was confidential, and he agreed to keep it under wraps. I also contacted a locksmith and had all the locks changed on the house. Back at work, Emily's colleagues were buzzing with gossip. Her executive assistant, Jessica, waited for her, noting her tardiness. Is it true? Jessica asked as Emily entered her office. What on earth are you talking about? Emily snapped. Everyone's talking about you and David, the gala on Friday night. Emily sank into her chair. Yes, we were there. What about it? What happened the rest of the weekend? Did you leave with that guy? That sleaze? Did you abandon David? Jessica slumped into a chair, crying. How did you know? I haven't told anyone. How did this get out? Everyone knows, you idiot. It's all over the company, and it's not even 10 a.m. yet. Jessica shouted. Emily's face turned pale as she sank into her seat. Just then, her boss, Linda Harrison, burst into the office. Oh my goodness, it's true, she exclaimed. Emily was stunned by her boss's reaction. The situation was spiraling out of control. I think this is being blown out of proportion, Emily said defensively. Oh, really? Linda retorted, smirking. Do you know who he is? How do you think the whole city, maybe half the East Coast, already knows? Emily paled, staring at her hands. What did David tell you? He said we're finished. Claimed he'd ruin me like I ruined him. Who does he think he is? He doesn't run my life. He doesn't own me. He's your husband, you idiot. Linda shouted. What did David do when you got home on Sunday? Emily glanced. Down at her desk, sniffling. He sold my car. Said he didn't need it anymore since he didn't have a wife to drive it. Linda gasped. Oh my goodness. At that moment, the door burst open and Stephanie Johnson, the vice president of acquisitions at Chase Bank, stormed in, followed by Emily's secretary, Angela. I'm sorry, Mrs. Watson. She just barged in, Angela said. It's okay, Angela. Come on in, Steph, Emily said, with a touch of sarcasm. What the heck have you done? Stephanie demanded. Just then, Linda's phone rang. Hello? Yes, Hank. I'm with her right now. No, we haven't heard anything from him yet. I'm just getting the details now. Yes, dear. I'll let you know as soon as I find out. Goodbye, dear. That was my husband, Hank. Wondering if you've heard from David today, Linda said. No, I haven't spoken to him since last night, Emily replied. With that, she dialed her husband's number. Her phone beeped twice before announcing that her service had been cut off. She stared at the phone like it was a poisonous snake. He disconnected my phone, she murmured. Linda sighed. This is bad. Very bad. Just then, Angela entered, saying a young woman was urgently requesting to see Emily. She says it's about your marriage, Angela added. Send her in, Angela, Emily said. A tall, blonde woman dressed in a navy blue skirt, ivory blouse, 3-inch heels, and a blazer entered, carrying a small briefcase. She approached Emily's desk, surveyed the room, and fixed her gaze on Emily. Are you Mrs. Emily Watson? the woman asked. At least for now, Emily replied, trying to stay composed. Stephanie confronted her. Listen, lady, who do you think you are? Yes, I'm David Watson's wife. Do you have something for me? Emily asked, dreading what was coming next. Congratulations, Mrs. Watson. You've been served, the woman said, handing her a large envelope, snapping a photo, and quickly leaving. At the door, she turned and added, 7 years ago, my mother tore our family apart just like you did. I hope you enjoyed it. Good day. Emily's head dropped to her desk as she held the envelope. Linda hurried to her side, helping her sit up as Emily struggled to breathe. Stephanie called David's office. New York City Herald, Mr. Watson's office. How may I assist you? I need to speak with Mr. Watson, please. It's Mrs. Stephanie Johnson from Chase Bank. May I ask what this is regarding, ma'am? It's about his wife. I'm sorry, ma'am. He's not taking calls from his wife. He said to tell her to. Just put him on the phone, damn it. Stephanie snapped. Hold on one moment, please. Soon, David's voice came through the speaker. Well, Stephanie, I bet Linda and Jessica are there too, with the cheating queen. What do you need? David, you're being unreasonable. She's a wreck, and you're not helping. What's your plan here? Ask her what she thought would happen when she took off for a pleasure-filled weekend. Tell her to lawyer up and talk to them. I won't talk to her until we sit down with our kids on Saturday. Goodbye, Stephanie. Click. Linda gasped. You're in deep trouble. Stephanie retorted. Your only hope is to bear it all and beg for mercy. Oh wait, you already did that this weekend, didn't you? Emily's head thudded against the desk again, but no one rushed to help her. David ended the call and dialed his son in Massachusetts. David Jr. was in a serious relationship, and David hoped this situation wouldn't impact it, but they needed to talk. After 3 rings, his son answered, Hey, Dad. What's up? Not great, son. How's Lauren? She's good. Dad, what's going on? Is Mom all right? She's physically okay. I need you and your sister here for a family meeting on Saturday. Lauren can come too. 2 tickets will be waiting for you at the counter on Friday. Just be here. It's important. Dad, what's happening? You're scaring me. Son, I haven't talked to you like this in over a decade, but I need you to trust me now and do as I say without questions. David hung up, deciding not to influence their opinions about their mother. He'd let them decide for themselves. The conversation with his daughter went similarly, but she seemed more emotional. She agreed to see him on Friday. The rest of his day passed quietly. He consulted his lawyer and updated his private investigator on the progress with Roger Benson. Back at Crimson Publishing, Emily's colleagues were trying to offer support, but she was overwhelmed and inconsolable, babbling and crying. What have I done? What have I done? She kept repeating. Linda finally took charge. We need to pull ourselves together and level the playing field. She called a friend on her cell phone. Hey, Kathy, it's Linda Harrison. Can you represent a friend of mine in a divorce? Her name is Emily Watson. Yes, her husband is David Watson. Wait, what? Oh, I see. Thanks a lot. What was that about? Emily asked. She already sees you as toxic. That was Kathy O'Hara. She's tough and hates bad husbands almost as much as cheating wives. When she heard your name, she knew the situation. She said if she took the case, her husband would divorce her. They're devout Catholics with 4 kids, and they know David and you. Plus, she's aware of the sleaze involved. Stephanie chimed in. Let me give it a shot. She dialed a number on her cell phone. Hey, this is Stephanie Johnson. Can I speak to Brett Walker? Yeah, it's about a divorce. Hi, Brett. I need to discuss a divorce matter with you. Oh, you've already heard? Well, thanks anyway. She hung up and turned to Emily. You're not getting any breaks. He said you brought this on yourself and that he wouldn't challenge Jack Coleman for anything. Emily's head dropped to her desk again, this time landing on her arms. Linda called in some favors to stir up trouble discreetly. Nothing too serious, just enough to rattle Benson. They sabotaged his car, slashed the tires, and left a mess on the hood and sides. This retaliation would continue for a while, and David wasn't concerned about the cost. Emily had a hard time finding a lawyer, but eventually, she found a feminist attorney willing to take her case. Meanwhile, The family meeting was set for Saturday. It was a cold day in New York, almost as chilly as the atmosphere at home. The kids flew in from both coasts. David Jr. brought along his fiancée, Lauren. David hoped he was making the right choice because this meeting was going to be intense. Their mom was still staying at a hotel, and the kids didn't understand why. "Where is she?" they asked. "She's at the Plaza Hotel. If you want to see her, try calling her there." "I tried, Dad. Her cell phone isn't working anymore." "Why would that be?" "It's disconnected. Call her workplace or leave a message at the front desk." The kids looked at each other, confused. "What's going on?" "Your mom has a problem I can't discuss. Talk to her, and you'll understand." They tried to reach her but couldn't get through. Her secretary said she'd talk to them on Saturday morning at 9 a.m. David took the kids out to dinner, and they had a nice, though slightly awkward, time. Saturday morning was clear and cold, typical for New York this time of year. The kids had coffee, waiting for their mom to show up. She arrived with the Honorable Kathleen O'Hara. "Seriously, Emily, bringing your lawyer here in front of the kids?" "My client didn't want any attacks on her character in front of her children," Kathleen replied. "Your choice," David said, leading them into the living room. The kids rushed to their mom, eager to know what was happening. "No questions for my client," Kathleen said sternly. "What? Who is this, Mom?" David Jr. asked. "I'm Miss Emily Hayes' attorney. Your father is filing for divorce against her." "Game over," David said, smiling as he sat silently. Jack had advised him to either speak the truth or stay silent if this happened. Looking back, it was wise counsel. David Jr. spoke first. "What's going on, Mom?" "Please direct all questions to me," Kathleen interjected. "What's happening, Mom? Talk to me," Olivia pleaded. "Your father wants a divorce," Emily finally whispered, avoiding their gaze. "Why, Mother?" David Jr. asked. Emily averted her gaze and whispered, "I don't know." "Really, Emily? Is that how you're handling this?" David asked. She began to cry. "My turn," David said, taking over. "Your mother and I attended a charity gala last Friday. She mingled with a man who offered her a weekend of pleasure, promising her experiences she'd never forget. They went to the balcony, and I was warned by a woman who had been in Emily's position before. They left together, and she told me she was going home with him for the weekend. I should have caused a scene, but I didn't. I regret it." David's voice cracked as he continued. "Your mother, however, went ahead with what she wanted, just as predicted. I didn't hear from her until Sunday afternoon when she texted me that she was on her way home. She got home around 5:30 p.m., dropped off by him. I was furious. I had changed the locks because I didn't want her bringing him into our home. You sold my car," Emily exclaimed. "It was my car, and I didn't need it anymore. I gave you the money for it. I didn't give it away like you did with your dignity." Emily started to crumble. "But you know what hurt the most? She wore her diamond necklace, the one I gave her for our 20th anniversary, and her emerald earrings to the party. When she came home, she still had them, along with her wedding and engagement rings. I took those back because we're no longer married. The engagement ring was my grandmother's. But you know what she didn't have anymore? The one piece of jewelry she claimed to cherish the most? My kids knew immediately. Jackie's ring, they said. Yes, Jackie's ring. She lost that, and you know why?" Emily sobbed. "Please, David, stop. Please, I'll sign everything. Just stop." So I spent the weekend and the whole week sorting things out and crying. I cried a lot. That's why I have nothing left now. "Daddy, can't you forgive her for one mistake?" Olivia pleaded. "Yeah, Dad, it was just one time. Mom deserves better from you. Move on," David Jr. added. David was stunned. His kids were supporting their mom despite her betrayal. "Are you even listening to what we're talking about? Do you know what she did? Let's see. Tell me, Emily, did you have an inappropriate conversation with a man who wasn't your husband last Friday night?" "I chatted with a charming guy," Emily replied, dodging the question. "Answer the question," David demanded. "Well, I guess I might have. And did he tell you to tell your husband you were going home with him to be intimate?" "Yes, but I'm a grown woman and—" "So did you sleep with him?" "I don't know," Emily stammered. "Tell us what you did all weekend. Did you play games? Write letters to your kids? Did you even bother to call your husband? You're just a hypocrite, Emily snapped, throwing an insult that David ignored. I wanted it, so I did it, Emily confessed. Know this. I'll have you questioned under oath about that weekend. The world will know if they don't already. And the woman who served you papers, she's actually a lawyer. She volunteered because her family faced the same issue. That's why she became an attorney. Emily realized she was in deep trouble. She broke down, all her confidence gone. I'll sign everything and give it to Jack today. Kathleen intervened. I don't think this is in your best interest. You're fired, Kathleen. Send your invoice to my office, and I'll arrange for payment, Emily snapped. David smiled, feeling victorious. Emily headed for the door and glanced back at him. Goodbye, David. Kids, I'll call you tomorrow, and we can meet up. She exited, and the door shut behind her. Kathleen remained in the living room. Well, she said to David, I hope you're content. She's devastated. Get out of my house, witch, David growled. Kathleen huffed, turned, and left. The kids turned on David. Dad, how could you be so mean to Mom? Olivia demanded. What's the matter with you, Dad? Are you really divorcing Mom over this? David Jr. asked. Do you think I should just put up with this? Is this what you both expect from your marriages? David turned to Lauren. If that's the case, get out of there as fast as you can, Lauren. She gasped and stared at him. I would never do something like that, Dad. It's just wrong. Surely, Dad, you're not really going through with this? David Jr. pleaded. It's settled. And if you can't support me on this, don't invite me to any family events in the future, David replied firmly. Olivia was in a complaining mood. Dad, why were you so mean? Mom was in such a bad state when she left. You should forgive her and take her back. David was stunned. Are you serious? He shouted. She didn't even admit what she did wrong or say sorry. Not that it would change anything, but at least showing some remorse would have been the decent thing to do. Lauren finally spoke up. Dad, this might upset David, but you're right. Mom didn't even apologize. She just made excuses. Not that it would change anything, but she should have at least tried. Things got tense after that. About an hour later, the kids called their mom and arranged to visit her. David gave David Jr. a spare key and reminded him to drive safely. Do you want to come along? David Jr. asked. Are you serious? David shouted. David Jr. stared at him, confused. I can't understand you, Dad, he muttered, leaving the house. David intensified his efforts against Roger Benson, and his allies seemed to be having a blast while getting the job done. One tactic was to switch Benson's license plate and anonymously report his car as stolen to the police. David was impressed by how easily they accessed Benson's vehicles, even though he kept his Jaguar and BMW in a garage. They also tailed him on the Long Island Expressway, using a device that manipulated the car's computer, causing it to swerve and hit a barrier. It caused significant damage and landed him in the hospital for 5 days. Meanwhile, his insurance premium skyrocketed, and he lost coverage from his original provider. That evening, Jack called to inform David that he had delivered the legal documents to Emily personally. Jack had lined up a favorable judge whose son had been a victim of Roger Benson 3 years ago. He assured David that he would expedite both the divorce and the alienation of affection lawsuit. As for the adultery charge, it was uncertain if they could make much headway, but it was worth a shot. The kids grew distant from David, especially after the initial confrontation. Only Lauren expressed support for his stance. After about a week, they returned to school, and the divorce proceedings continued. When the final decree was issued, David felt liberated, just in time for the Cancer Society ball. He knew Benson would be there, and he was itching for payback. At a coffee shop, one of David's allies pitched an idea that was so brilliant he had to see it for himself. David called Jennifer Avery to see if she planned to attend. She mentioned that she had an invite but hadn't thought about going. David suggested it would be worth her while, especially if she wanted to witness some entertainment, which he planned to provide. They arrived and mingled, and David noticed Emily there with her friends, Linda and Stephanie. She was trying to talk to Roger Benson, but he was focused on a petite brunette in a green dress. Benson's 2 goons were keeping her husband occupied while he made his move. He led her to a private room and shut the door. David approached the husband, and offered to help if he trusted him and followed his lead. The husband looked panicked, and Jennifer started explaining the situation. David warned him that if he caused a scene, he'd likely get beaten up, but if he cooperated, they'd still leave together, just a bit embarrassed. The husband reluctantly agreed. As they emerged from the side room, with the wife leading, David and Jennifer followed closely behind. They stopped to grab their coats while the goons arranged for Benson's car to be brought around. They exited just as Benson and the brunette got into the back seat. After the doors closed, the second goon got into the front passenger seat. The husband was on edge, but David urged him to wait. David's friend had arranged for two of his associates, who worked at an auto detail shop, to plant 3 smoke bombs with a skunk smell under the seats, controlled by electronic detonators. As the car moved about 10 feet, it suddenly stopped, hitting a parked taxi. The doors swung open, and 4 people stumbled out, coughing and retching with smoke billowing around them. The brunette's dress slipped, and her panties ended up on the pavement. The husband rushed to her side, though he wobbled a bit from the smell and smoke. David smirked as Benson struggled to stand, his injured leg making him hobble. Just then, the police arrived as Benson moved toward his former lover, but the husband intervened, landing a punch to his stomach and a kick to his groin. Down Benson went. The husband quickly led his wife away, even with the skunk smell clinging to her, scolding her as they left. David turned to Jennifer. "That's one for the good guys." He had given the husband his business card and told him to call the next day. David dialed a speed dial number on his cell phone. "Hello?" a voice answered. "Great job," David said. "Thanks," the voice replied, and the call ended. David and Jennifer headed to her townhome, where things quickly heated up. They ended up in her bedroom, exploring different kinds of intimacy. While David hadn't been celibate since his divorce, this was a new level of connection for him. Jennifer and David reached the bed, where she pushed him down and took control. She cried out her late husband's name as they continued, overwhelmed by emotions. Afterward, she collapsed, crying, then composed herself, apologizing for her outburst. David reassured her, understanding her pain. They talked, acknowledging the emotional intensity of the moment. David wasn't sure what he felt for her, but there was definitely a connection. After some rest, he showered, dressed, and kissed her goodbye. She asked if he thought she'd be okay, and he assured her he'd call. In the following months, David and Jennifer grew closer while family matters progressed. David Jr. got married, and despite the past, they invited his mother. They expected David to handle it, and he assured them he would, but he didn't show up. Lauren's parents were unaware of the situation and weren't happy with David. Lauren's mother filled them in, which shocked her parents. Their Italian family promptly cut ties with Emily, with Lauren's grandmother even spitting in her face. Things escalated when one of Emily's friends hit on her, leading to a scene. She broke down and left the reception. David sent Lauren a nice note and a check, and he sent her parents a letter explaining why he couldn't be around Emily. He also emailed David Jr. a blunt message. The wedding had taken place in Westfield, New Jersey. A year later, David Jr. and Lauren welcomed a baby boy named John David Watson, honoring both grandfathers. Lauren invited David to the christening, which thrilled him. He traveled to Newark, rented a hotel, and attended the ceremony at St. Michael's Catholic Church in Montclair. Meeting his namesake was a joyous moment, but then David spotted Emily entering with someone, and he almost lost it. She came over, and David turned to his son. "Is she here?" "Lauren begged me to stay calm. Just this once," David replied. "Sorry, honey," he said, handing Lauren an envelope and then leaving. Back at the hotel, he checked out, headed to the airport, caught the next flight to New York, and returned home. Time passed, and David Watson Jr. landed a job in New York with the Justice Department. When David called to congratulate him and Lauren and ask about his grandson, he heard Lauren's voice in the background. "Who's calling?" David ended the call and powered off his phone. After that, he kept to himself mostly. The only person he really talked to was Jennifer, who had become both a close friend and a bedmate. David's campaign against Roger Benson seemed to still be working. Benson was trying to figure out who was targeting him, but he couldn't. Even David's son and daughter-in-law knew about it. It was still small stuff, but it was becoming legendary. About 3 months later, Lauren called David at work. Dad, next Saturday is little John's 3rd birthday. We're throwing a party and want you there. I'd love to, sweetheart, but you know how I feel. I'm not good company, and I don't want to spoil it. Mom isn't invited. I told David Jr. that she's not welcome. I'll cut him off if he invites her or asks her to come. David was impressed by this girl. His son didn't deserve her. I'd be honored to come. David got the details and cleared his schedule for the day. He called FAO Schwartz and ordered a classic fire truck, just like the one he had as a kid. He had it wrapped and sent to his office. David Jr. had one for Christmas one year, and it was a hit. No fancy electronics, just metal and rubber tires. They were always popular, especially with grandpas. David arrived at 9 a.m. on Saturday. They had a great time. Lunch, cake, coffee, and then presents. David chatted with Lauren's parents, who said they could see why their daughter thought highly of him. Lauren's dad loved the fire truck. Reminds me of the one I had when I was a kid. Good choice, David. Little John played with the truck all over the backyard until he got tired. His mom and grandma put him down for a nap. Even David Jr. was cordial. He brought his dad a beer and suggested he relax in the backyard. David took his advice and found a chair on the lawn. Life felt good. As David took a sip of his beer, a shadow fell over him. He glanced up to see his ex-wife with a glass of what looked like Chardonnay. "Hello, David. Mind if I join you?" David glared at her but stayed silent. She set her large purse down and sat, crossing her ankles, a pose she used to try to charm him. Not this time. David's glare made her shiver. "You're not making this easy, are you?" she said. "Anyway, David Jr. mentioned you'd be here, and Lauren made it clear I wasn't welcome. It might not sit well with him, but he thought it was worth a shot to patch things up between us. David Jr. thinks we deserve another chance. I want us to be together again, to wake up in each other's arms, grow old together. I've been lonely these past years. What do you say? Can we try again?" David looked her over. She had aged a lot, gained some weight, developed a nervous tic. She hadn't even apologized, just launched into her speech. David sighed, finished his beer, and got up. "Well," she asked, her voice trembling, "what's your answer?" "Not just no, but hell no, Emily. I've been through hell these past few years because of you." Maybe harsh, but it felt good to say. David walked away, heading toward the patio. He went through the sliding glass doors into the kitchen, where he ran into David Jr., who grinned at him. "So, how'd it go, Dad?" "Not too bad, huh?" David replied. Suddenly, a shot rang out, and screams filled the air as guests rushed outside. David grabbed his son's arm. "Your mother might be hurt. Go check on her." David Jr. paled and hurried outside. David grabbed a water bottle, went to the living room, and sat alone on the couch. The police arrived, taking statements. A .38 caliber can cause a lot of damage. David answered their questions, explaining he hadn't spoken to his ex-wife in years. He spoke with Lauren, comforting her through tears, then left for home. Jennifer called, having heard the news. David assured her he was handling it. She asked if she should come over. "No, I'll manage, but thanks for offering," David replied. On Monday, David called in Stu Williams, their top crime photographer in New York. Stu had won many local and national awards for his photography. "Stu, I need a favor. My ex-wife took her own life at my grandson's birthday party on Saturday. Most folks have heard about it. Boss, we're sorry, even though you two weren't close." "Thanks. I appreciate it. Do you have connections with the forensics team? Can you get me photos of her injuries? 10 by 12 color prints would be ideal." Stu gave David a curious look, thinking it over. "It's a bit unusual, but I can make it happen. I know some folks who owe me a favor. Might be a little weird, though." "Thanks, Stu. I owe you one. I'll get it done in a few days, boss." A plan started forming in David's head, adding to his revenge campaign. The wake lasted 3 days at a fancy funeral home on the Upper West Side. Her casket remained closed due to her appearance. She had many friends, with hundreds attending. David wasn't there. Word had it that his absence didn't go unnoticed. The day of her funeral was gray and rainy. David felt cold and damp. The procession included 3 flower cars, 2 limos, and the hearse, with about 40 cars following. Again, David wasn't among them. He stood at the cemetery, watching from a distance in the misty rain as the coffin was carried to the grave. Despite the weather, a large crowd gathered, and the priest said kind words. It made David wonder who he was talking about. He was surprised the priest even showed up, considering the circumstances of her death. David Jr. was scanning the area, probably searching for his dad. After the service ended, people began to leave. Soon, only immediate family and close friends remained. As the crowd thinned, it eventually dwindled down to just David Jr. and Lauren. They headed to the limos, with David Jr. lingering at the back door, scanning the surroundings. Eventually, he gave up and got in the car. It slowly made its way out of the cemetery and disappeared into the mist. David left the trees just as the groundskeepers were preparing to close the grave. Approaching her coffin, he briefly contemplated an act of defiance. However, all the anger and hatred had dissipated somehow. David didn't know how, but it had all faded away. Looking down at the woman he once loved, he sighed and bid her farewell. I forgive you, even if you don't acknowledge your wrongs. I forgive you. I used to love you, but not anymore. Arriving at work the following day, David found a large envelope on his desk. He hesitated before opening it, knowing what it contained. Eventually, he gathered the courage and took out the photo. It wasn't pleasant, but it was Emily. The children's charity benefit was approaching, marking the 4th anniversary of this whole ordeal. David called Jennifer and invited her to accompany him. She agreed enthusiastically, and they arranged for David to pick her up around 8 p.m. David summoned the society editor to his office, along with their investigative reporter and photographer. He wanted to convene a meeting to strategize and plan their next steps. When they gathered, David explained his plan. Next weekend, I want to publish that expose on Roger Benson. There were murmurs of approval. Only verified, factual, legally affirmed accounts supported by depositions and sworn statements. No guesswork. We should have enough evidence to bring him down. I want photographers at the event to capture everything, then we'll interview the organizers to tally the proceeds. Can we make this happen? I don't foresee any issues, boss. We'll be ready to publish by midnight on Friday, with space for any new photos, the society editor replied. Thank you, everyone, David said. A week later, David escorted Jennifer to the children's charity event. After checking their coats, they mingled with friends. There was Benson, moving through the crowd like a predator, searching for his next target. He spotted a pretty brunette with long hair whose husband had gone to the bar for drinks. Her champagne glass was nearly empty. She smiled as Benson approached her and whispered in her ear. Blushing slightly, she leaned in closer to him. He brushed her arm, then her shoulder. She shivered and moved closer to him. David noticed one of Benson's henchmen positioning himself near the balcony doors while the other began to approach the husband. Sensing trouble, the husband turned and confronted Benson, who intensified his advances. Turning to Jennifer, David said, "Now." Jennifer stepped away from David and moved closer to the second henchman, waiting. Benson whispered in the brunette's ear, took her arm, and led her toward the balcony. She grinned, seemingly enjoying herself. David stepped in between them and spoke up. "Excuse me, you don't know me, but this guy made similar advances to my wife about 4 years ago. She gave in and went off with him for the weekend. It wrecked our marriage and led to this." David showed her a photo of Emily's injuries. "This is my wife. She took her own life last week." David placed the picture in the brunette's hand. She went pale, trembling, and dropped her glass, which shattered, causing a commotion in the crowd. "This is your chance to avoid the same mistake she made," David warned. He discreetly signaled to the nearby photographers and noticed one of Benson's henchmen moving toward him. The shocked woman glanced at the photo, then turned to Benson. "You bastard!" she shouted, slapping him across the face, her nails digging into his skin. Just then, his bodyguard approached, but Jennifer stepped in. "Excuse me," she said calmly. David turned to leave, brushing past Benson with his right shoulder. "It's you," Benson snarled, reaching for David's shoulder. "Let go of me," David growled, spinning away from him to his left, then pivoting to punch Benson square in the nose with his right fist. Benson's nose crumpled, and his jaw cracked. Blood gushed, and he collapsed like a sack of bricks. His henchmen stood frozen while cameras clicked around them. Jennifer took David's arm as the brunette's husband approached her. "Please take me home now," she said, her voice trembling. David and Jennifer stepped onto the dance floor, and the crowd parted as they moved to the center. Facing the crowd, David pointed at Benson. "You should all be ashamed for supporting this guy. Just by donating to charity, you're enabling him. The charity and New York society should be accountable for his actions." David was about to lose his temper, but Jennifer pulled him away. They left the event and headed home, where she iced his sore fist. They had a passionate night together. The consequences were swift and harsh. While Benson's actions weren't illegal, public opinion was ruthless. He became an outcast, and charities rejected his donations. Contributions to the Children's Gala plummeted by 60%. Several organizations returned his money, removed him from boards, or censured him. Even the NAACP distanced themselves. As a stockbroker, his negative reputation cost him his license and job. He attempted to sue David and have him arrested, but the husband of the woman he tried to seduce, who was an ADA in Manhattan, launched his own investigation, rendering the lawsuit futile. Benson was found 2 weeks after he was fired, in an alley down by the old stockyards, with severe injuries. David and Jennifer became a couple, though marriage wasn't certain. Reconnecting with his kids and bonding with her children was challenging but rewarding. They were navigating through the difficulties as best they could.